off the G5 jet. I'm on my way to a brand new kit.
All right, welcome back. eSIM Studios Podcast live stream episode number 171. Apologize for not getting on air yesterday. Very busy. Do apologize, but we're back in it today. Making some adjustments. As you know, we also do a NFL channel. Making some adjustments behind the scenes. Created my own podcast network. And we will expand on that here shortly. And got it all set up and continually adding podcasts to that podcast network. So it'll have sports, it'll have technology. So it'll be a podcast network that'll have podcasts from me, encompassing sports and technology, and podcasts from other associates, friends of mine, YouTube friends of mine, podcast friends of mine that are also going to upload their podcast to that network. So I'm going to create my own little network, podcast network, that'll encompass sports and technology. Apologize. So I wanted to get into, and we're going to reduce the times of these a little bit, just because I think it's better listening, not prolonged. Should not go over an hour. Try to keep them 20 minutes, 30 minutes, short, quick, easy to upload, easy to listen to. If you miss this, you can always catch the replay on the eSIM Studios YouTube channel. So if you go to YouTube, type in eSIM Studios, or listen to us on podcast, eSIM Studios Podcast. Wherever you get your podcasts, simply type in, go to the search option, search button, type in eSIM Studios, and you'll find our podcast there. We're also going to do video podcast, right? Not just audio, but it will be video as well. So you can catch us there. I don't know if they'll have commercials or not, but anyways, you can catch us. Or what I do, just just Google. And it is a pun intended. Google search eSIM Studios, and we will pop up in all of our content. Just Google eSIM Studios, all of our content will show up. Speaking of Google yesterday, ruling came down from judge. Google is liable of operating in a monopolistic practices. Essentially, they were found guilty of being a monopoly. Now, in what aspect, right? In the search aspect, in the search engine. Now, in searching the internet. Now, it's no real big question. It's no big head scratcher. Do they dominate the market? Yes. Have they dominated for a long time? Yes, very long time. They actually, I wouldn't say introduced search on the internet, but they essentially did, right? So they launched soon after the internet started catching buzz. I think it was in the late 90s, what I remember. I remember my dad saying, when I was a kid, I'm 40, when I was a kid, my dad saying, well, just Google it. Like, what the hell is, what? Just Google it. And okay. And from there, it took off. So we'll get into why. We'll get into the who, what, when, where, and why. Let's pull up this article here. Let's see. Let me copy this. We'll do a quick screen share here and pull this up so everybody can check it out and see what I'm looking at, right? The Verge had a good article here. And let me pull up this other one. We'll get into what it means and what can they do from here, right? All right, so let me share the screen. Here we go. And judge rules Google is a monopolist in antitrust case. Judge Amit Mehta ruled in the favor of Justice Department, writing that Google has maintained a monopoly in the search and advertising markets. Now, before we get into the details, I try to keep my opinions not necessarily to a minimum, but try to keep my opinions fair. Obviously, and try to keep it along. I try not to be biased, right? Like, regardless if I like a company, regardless if I like their products, regardless if I use them or not, I try to throw common sense into any judgment that I put out there in the public, as fair as possible. But before we get into the details, I do have an issue with the whole monopoly thing. I do run my own business, and it's almost like it's a catch-22, right? Two sides of the sword, because USA is all about money. It's all about capitalism. It's all about big business. If you want to do big business anywhere in the world, you either do business with America or American companies, or you move to America, set up shop, and do business in the USA, right? Pro-business. Is a capitalistic society. So it's almost like they definitely encourage you to get bigger, right? And then once you get to a certain level, then eventually you have a ton of success, and then you have a board of directors, and then you offer public shareholders a stock in your company. You're always worried about the bottom line. You're always projecting. We need growth, more and more and more and more. But then it's like when you get to a certain size, now I know this is rare and only affects literally 0.0001% of companies in the United States. If you get too big in a certain industry, the government, the Justice Department, Federal Justice Department will come after you and file a lawsuit such as this, antitrust and or monopoly cases against you. And again, I know it's very rare, but it's almost like, what do you want Google to do? They're trying to grow as much as possible, yet if you get too big, the government comes down on you hard, right? And this is basically what we have now. This case did open up some eye-raising details about what they have got going on. And here's the other thing. You do have other options. And we will get into those shortly. So this is what the judge is quoted as saying. After having carefully considered and weighing the witness testimony and the evidence, the court reaches the following conclusion. Google is a monopolist, and it has acted as one or maintained its it has violated Section 2 of the Sherman Act by saying general search services. It violated the Section 2 of the Sherman Act in general search services and general search text advertising. It's not clear what this ruling will mean for the future of Google's business, as this initial finding is only about the company's liability, not about remedies. Google's fate will be determined in the next phase of proceedings, which could result in anything from a mandate to stop certain business practices or a breakup of Google's search business. I wanted to read that before I got into my next statement, because if you do a research of previous monopoly cases, it dates back even as far as the oil, right? Oil business. Companies have been broken up to create smaller oil companies like Pennzoil. Even now, that was a large one where the actual company was broken up into smaller separate companies, and then each one of those little separate companies are created, pay their own taxes, have their own CEOs and employees that are independent of each other. The last big tech giant to be found liable, well, I shouldn't say found liable, but on a monopolistic case, is Microsoft. I believe that was in the early 2000s with Windows. The government claimed that it had a monopoly with Edge browser. As you know, back then, even before Macs were popular, everybody used Windows. And the default browser on a Windows device was the Edge browser. Now, I don't know where this will go. Again, they're just found guilty. We don't know what the outcome is going to be. Now, Google has appealed this ruling. They have appealed it. However, I don't think they're going to win the appeal because it's pretty clear, even in my eyes, yeah, they have a search monopoly. So some of the records that came out in this case is that Google is actually paying Apple billions of dollars. It came out in court, $20 billion in 2022. $20 billion. Google paid Apple for being the default search engine on all iOS devices. Now, if you've listened to our podcast, and when this first came, when the United States government first filed suit against Google, we brought this forward, and I presented the news and basically said that's going to be the major issue. We knew Google did pay Apple to be the default search engine on all iOS devices. And you know how many iPhones they sell each year? What was it? 286 million iPhones, I believe it was. We looked up the other day, worldwide. So every device that gets sold, Google was the default search engine. Now you can go in when you get an iPhone, or an iOS device. Shit, even a Google, my Samsung, it defaults to Google. However, you can go in the settings and change it to Samsung browser or whatever you want to do. Same thing with iOS. You can change it. However, 99% of people that get a Samsung and or an iPhone or any mobile device does not change it. 99% of people just get a phone and start using it. What I think could happen, my personal belief is that the United States will not force Google to break up. I believe so. I don't think the U.S. government is going to say you can't have your search engine or your search company anymore. It has to be broken up into little separate companies. I don't think they're going to go that far. Here's what I think they're going to do. I think what they're going to do is they're going to force Apple to they're going to force Google to cut ties with Apple. And I am in favor of that. I mentioned, if you watched, I don't know, maybe a month or two ago, or probably longer than that, 3 months ago, whenever this suit was filed, I was quoted as saying, this is going to come and bite them in the ass. Paying Apple to be the default search engine, right? So I think what the government's going to happen, or what the government's going to tell them to do, is essentially cut ties with Apple. Now, that means being the default search engine. That doesn't mean you can't install Google Search on an iPhone. That simply means what Apple's going to have to do is whenever you get a new iPhone, it's either going to have to pop up when you first get an iPhone, sign into the account. It'll probably pop up and ask you, what browser do you want to use? And then you select. What search engine do you want to use? And you select. I think it's going to be user option based instead of default based. I'm in favor of that. I don't want Google paying Apple $20 billion per year, right? To be there. Even though, look, it is the best search engine. I actually love it. I actually use it every day. I have no issues with it. But I get what the government's saying, essentially. So I don't think this is a huge hit to Google. Now, why would Google want to pay Apple? Why would Google want to be the default search engine basically on every Android phone and iOS phone in the world? It comes down to money, right? $20 billion seems like a lot, but Google, just think of this. If Google is paying Apple $20 billion a year to be the default search engine on iOS, then it's got to be making an insane amount of money, more than that $20 billion. Now, so Google basically does this because it makes them money. How does it make Google money? By being the number one default search on all Android and iOS devices. Well, that's because Google sells advertisements. If you have your own company, if you've ever purchased Google Ads, Google advertising, it's very accurate. It's very expensive, may I add. And look, that's a whole nother issue. There's been claims that they overcharge on advertising. But that's why. The more Google can put, so if, let's say in my company, if I want to advertise the way it's set up, I want to run Google Ads. I can choose where to run the ads. I can choose when to run the ads. I can choose, do I want it on Android only? I can choose, do I want it on iOS only? It's very, very specific. But it gives advertisers that much more reach to potentially reach customers, potential customers, right? So it just opens up the door more for their advertising, in which they can charge more. If you say, hey, we can reach essentially everybody with an iPhone or Android, you can raise the prices. So Google essentially is a selling advertisement company. I know a lot of people think, oh, they sell pixels. They don't make hardly anything on their Pixel line. Trust me, nothing, pennies, crumbs. If they drop the Pixel line, if they dropped all their hardware, right? If they stop selling Pixels, if they stop selling these little Chromecasts or anything, earbuds or watches, they'd be fine, right? They're just doing this to try to get in another market as far as hardware. Google's a software company, right? Apple's a hardware company. Now, I know they have iOS and everything, but they are experts in iOS, and that's it. So when you see Apple trying to reach out to do this AI thing, they don't have a clue what they're doing. When you see Apple Siri sucks. Their browser, Safari, depending on who you ask, not as good as Chrome. And they don't really sell advertisements. So that's why Apple's classified as technically a hardware company. Google's a software company. So Google is selling services, and Google's paying Apple to be on every iOS device to in turn sell more sell more advertisements and in turn make more money. Google makes more money on ad revenue than any other area. Google makes more money selling ads than they do on the Pixel phones, than they do on renting a movie on Google, whatever you want to call it, TV, what have you. It's an advertising company. That's just what it is. And that's how they make money. When you search for something and sponsors pop up like this, watch. If you type in a random search, right? Best custom hats, right? I want to make custom hat, right? Look what pops up. Sponsored. All this is paid for. So, and it's expensive. It's not cheap. I've run ads on Google. It is not cheap. All this sponsored placement. See this? Sponsored right here. Customize more of the ads you see. All this money. So the more people that use Google, the more money Google makes. Essentially, the more you search, the more they make. So that's why they want to be on every device in the globe, because the more you search, the more they make. So you see, now the government is suing not only Google. The government's on a roll here. They're suing Amazon. They're suing Apple. They're suing Meta. They're going after every tech giant. So it's pretty interesting to see. Now I'm not exactly sure what's going on in each case. Just not aware. I'll probably look into that at some point. Here's the official 286-page document. If you all want to check it, I doubt you do. If you all want to check it out, Actually, I might look at it. It's got social media ads, marketing funnel. Interesting. You would think I would have read it before this show, but 286 pages, so it's time for that. Anyways, look at this. Google's trial shows that Apple's search deal is the most important contract in technology. Search is the biggest business in business, and for anyone wanting to make big in search, the fastest way to win is in Safari. Let's see here. So, Google's been Apple's default search engine across its products for more than 20 years, since its first launch in 2003. So, Google's been the default search engine on iOS since the inception in 2003 for Apple products. They pay Apple more than $10 billion a year to remain the default. However, where was that $20 billion I saw? I think it doubled. So in 2020, Google paid Apple $10 billion. And then in just 2 years' time, their revenue increased so much. It doubled to $20 billion in 2022. They had the CEO of DuckDuckGo, testify against Apple, basically hating on Google. But look, DuckDuckGo is there. Bing is there. Yahoo is there. So that's the thing. Like, I see how the government can claim this is a monopoly, and honestly, I guess it is. But there's other options out there. Like, you don't have to use Google. But on the other hand, like I said, 99% of people that get an iPhone, they get an Android, just for whatever reason, whether they don't know how to change the default engine or they just don't care. But 99% of people just use with what comes on the device. And maybe that goes into play with a ruling. But you can change the default search engine, and it only takes a couple seconds. So it is what it is. I don't know where they're going to go. I'm thinking they will require Google to cut ties with Apple as far as paying Apple this much money. I think you will see that judgment come out of this, and there really won't be that much on the outside for people like me and you, the end user. We won't really notice that much. It'll still, I don't really use iPhone, so nothing will change in my life. Now, if you're an iPhone user, what will change in your life? Next time you get a new iPhone, when you sign in, it'll probably just ask you, what browser do you want to use and what search engine do you want to use? And then probably have a list of a couple, 2 or 3, browsers. Or Apple could just default it to Apple's. What does Apple use? Does Apple have a search? Does it use Safari has its own search engine? Yes, Apple has several search engines for its devices, including Spotlight. Helps users find things across their devices. No, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about like Google-like. App Store, Maps. No. Pegasus, a next-generation search engine for Apple's apps. No. Apple Body, web crawler that indexes websites for search results. Maybe? I don't know. It says Apple has also been working on a web search engine for years, and in iOS 14, back in 2020, Apple changed the default search screen to use its own web index instead of Google's. However, in September of 23, Apple's Senior Vice President of Services, Eddie Q, testified that Apple has no plans to create an Apple search model because its partnership with Google works better for its customers. Oh, really? Or does it work better for you? It works better for you because you're getting $20 billion a year. So that was a lie. Well, it looks like they're going to have to get back on the horse and create this Apple search. Because at the very least, look, they were found guilty. At the very least, they're going to cut ties, right? Because that's basically the options. They're going to cut ties with Apple and or break up the Google search into little companies. At the very least, they're going to cut ties. Because even if they told Google to sell off the search engine and or make several smaller companies out of it, that's going to break the contract that they have with Apple anyways. So at the very least, they're going to cut ties. This will cut ties with Apple and Apple search. Good luck. I know you're going to suck right off the bat, but maybe that'll bring some people over here. To the Android side. I have no idea. Apple already designs its own chips, operates an app store, sells music offline, offers video to gaming services, and has in-house Maps app that competes with Google. The only thing missing is a full-blown Apple search engine. And while one won't be launched anytime soon, it may be closer than you think. That'll do it for the day. I do appreciate the time. And remember, if you did miss this and or any other episode, just hit up eSIM Studios on YouTube. And don't forget eSIM Studios Podcast, available across all platforms worldwide. Just simply search eSIM Studios. I'm going to get out of here. Peace out, guys.